The following message by Alistair Begg is made available by Truth for Life. For more information, visit us online at truthforlife.org.
I'm going to do a check with headquarters, and there's been a wholesale affirmative reaction to this idea. That means that I've talked to one person, and yeah. And since let's be honest. The only reason I'm here is, I presume, because by the goodness of God, I managed to stay on a horse for as long as I have. I mean, I don't really bring anything to the table. We're all doing the same thing every week. We all can help each other out with that. But you know, most guys overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, and they underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. And so just the sticking with the program, I think, is part of it. So I thought what I would do is, and we can do this interactively, you can interrupt at every point, all right? Not yet. I'm just going to talk about the dangers, the delights, the disappointments, the duties, the difficulties, and the potential disasters of a long ministry in one place. We'll call it no dull days. No dull days. There are difficult days, disastrous days, disappointing days, discouraging days, and any other you can think of with a D. But let me just read. Just read from Acts 6, just the opening verses of Acts 6, and then actually there's no particular logic to either of these readings. Or there is, but I don't know what it is. So, Acts chapter 6. Now, in these days when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, "It is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word." And what they said pleased the whole gathering. And they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicolaus, a proselyte of Antioch. These they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands on them. And the word of God continued to increase, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith. And then I want to go back to Nehemiah again, if you don't mind, and to 6, and the unholy trinity that we're introduced to there. The reason for this, I think, is the reason for the Acts passage is we'll give ourselves to prayer and the ministry of the word. I presume that's why I made a note of that. And this, because of the peculiar challenges that are represented to the leadership. Nehemiah 6, now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left in it, although up to that time I had not set up the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, "Come and let us meet together at Heldafidim in the plain of Ono." But they intended to do me harm. And I sent messengers to them, saying, "I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" And they sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat, for the 5th time, sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. in it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it, that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That is why you are building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. And you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem, there is a king in Judah. And now the king will hear of these reports. So now come and let us take counsel together. Then I sent to him, saying, no such things as you say have been done, for you're inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. All right. Well, this is a little unfinished, if you like, which is a euphemism for it is unfinished. What I'm going to try and communicate now isn't research. It's just reflection. All right. This is not as a result of having done one of those Pew things or surveyed 1,000 people. It's just observations. Like there is no ideal place to serve God except the place He sets you down. That length of service is not necessarily an indication of usefulness. So I don't want you to think that I'm here to say, I stayed there a long time. Yeah, I stayed there a long time. I don't know whether I should be commended for sticking at it or criticized for a lack of initiative. After all, you know where I live, right? Cleveland, Ohio. I mean, who goes to Cleveland, Ohio? People are trying to get out of Cleveland, Ohio. They're trying, if they had any, if they had a modicum of initiative in them, they'd be long gone. So let's just acknowledge that a great deal can be accomplished in a short while, and one can take a very long time to achieve very little. So that's a sort of disclaimer, because we're talking about staying somewhere for a long time. So the fact that God has chosen to do that is not necessarily the great issue. I mean, McShane did not stay for a very long time. He was 29 when he died. So, and what was accomplished under God by McShane in that time was, unparalleled. Also, and here's another just observation, between year 5 and year 14, according to the gurus, between year 5 and year 14 is the period of greatest impact in pastoral ministry. Unfortunately, the average length of a pastorate is 4 years. So whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. Also, when we talk in terms of dangers and delights, they're not actually unique to a certain time frame. We can be dealing with delightful things and disastrous things in relatively short order. But anyway, I just wrote a number down under delight and maybe a few under dangers, okay? So delight. 1, being set apart to the cause of the gospel, being entrusted with the inestimable privilege of proclaiming the unsearchable riches of grace. So that's the first delight, isn't it? That of all the things that God might have done with us in our lives, that He has entrusted to us the privilege of giving ourselves, Acts 6, to prayer and to the ministry of the Word of God. I take it, I'm hopeful that we agree on this, that there are at least 2 things that are requisite for anyone who is going to be listened to in pastoral ministry. And one is that he must be called of God to occupy that office, and then that he must be prepared to faithfully employ himself in the discharge of those duties. So the sense of call that has placed me in it, and then the commitment to faithfully do what we've said to do. In many ways, it's like marriage, isn't it? That for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. I mean, that's really it. In fact, in the marriage ceremony, in the Anglican marriage ceremony, where in the preamble it said, "It is not to be entered upon lightly or carelessly, but thoughtfully, with reverence for God, with due consideration of the purposes for which it was established by God." And the same is true in pastoral ministry. I'm very Spurgeonic on this. I agree Spurgeon was right. If you can stay out, stay out. I don't believe that we're all called to pastoral ministry, that anybody who's got any interest in teaching the Bible is ipso facto called to pastoral ministry. They can do all kinds of things. But anyway, two things are requisite: the call of God and faithfulness to duty. Lloyd Jones, in his introduction to Preaching and Preachers, in fact, if you listen to the talks that he gave at Westminster all those years ago, he says there, "Ultimately, my reason for being ready to give these lectures is that to me the task of preaching is the highest and the greatest and the most glorious calling to which anyone can ever be called." So it is our primary duty. John Owen referred to it in those terms as the importance of giving ourselves to the performance of our primary Christian duty. What's requisite then in having this delightful privilege? This is John Owen. Number one, spiritual wisdom in understanding the mysteries of the gospel. Spiritual wisdom in understanding the mysteries of the gospel. You say, well, the gospel, there's no mystery in the gospel. Wait a minute. And also, let's be clear that telling people the benefits of accepting the gospel or warning people about the dangers of rejecting the gospel is not actually telling them the gospel. You actually be amazed at how many apparent evangelistic talks are not evangelistic talks at all, because there's no gospel in them. The people actually saying, but wait a minute, I don't understand what the gospel is. I know you told me that it's a bad idea if I reject it, and it's a good idea if I accept it, but you haven't told me what's happened here. So, a real grasp, a spiritual wisdom in understanding the mysteries of the gospel. Secondly, experiencing the power of the truth that we preach to others. Experiencing the power of the truth that we preach to others. We could say more about that. Thirdly, obviously, skill in dividing the Word of God correctly. I've been laboring through 1st and 2nd Samuel for a long time now. One of my young colleagues said to me, why don't you, when we were talking about 2 years ago, what are you going to do next? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, why don't you do 1st Samuel? And I said, I can't do 1 Samuel. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I can't understand the chronology of 1 Samuel. I've never really been able to figure out, when Saul knew him and when he didn't know him and when he was playing the harp and when he was killing Goliath and everything. It scared the bejabbers out of me. And he said, he said, yeah, okay, I get that. He said, but you can figure it out. And he said, and I still think you ought to do it. And so, he's like 27 years old. Now I'm doing what he says. But so... Now, whether the congregation is happy about it, I don't know, but we're at the end of the 20th chapter in 2 Samuel as of now. But the reason I mention it under this heading is because I was just talking to my brother here about one of our Australian friends, John Woodhouse, whose work on 1st and 2nd Samuel has been the greatest benefit to me. And in actual fact, he and I have become close friends, although we've never met one another, but we talk on the phone. And I basically said to him, I said, John, if you would just come here, then we can remove the middleman from this series. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, basically, it's your material, because he is so masterful at being able to navigate that Old Testament narrative in a way that doesn't disengage it from everything that went before and everything that follows. And I need help with that, and we all need help in that, because we if we don't allow the text to do that to us and stretch us in that way, then we'll all default. We'll default. We'll default, as Dick Lucas would say, to our framework, to a big F and a small T. So unless the T is established in the agenda, then the framework will fill it in. So the framework, what's the framework? Reformed theology. We'll always get to there. The framework is eschatology. We'll always get to there. Framework is baptism. We'll always get whatever it is, unless the text is established in the agenda. And we need skill in being prepared to acknowledge that if I preach this text correctly in light of the wider context, it's not actually going to come out the way I want it to come out. Because what I want to say is actually something different from what the text is saying, because I want to safeguard the Bible from itself almost. I mean, it's a strange thought, isn't it? I can tell by the way you're looking at me, you think it is too. But you know the famous one, don't you? Where, you get this all the time in the old sermons where the guy's preaching, he says, I'm going to preach on Adam, where are you? Remember that? And he was a famous Baptist from London. And so I'll deal with it under three headings. Number one, where Adam was. Number two, how Adam came to be there. And number three, a few thoughts on believers' baptism. So that's what I'm talking about, all right? We had a guy in Cleveland when I got there in 1983. It didn't matter, you give him any passage of the Bible. It says Lamentations 3, I am the man who has seen affliction, and I'll tell you about affliction. The affliction of that rock music that's going on these days. It's like, what? This is Lamentations 3. Yeah, he has driven and brought me into darkness. That is a dark world, that dirty, filthy. It's like, you want to teach the Bible? And there's not a passage he couldn't get to the millennium. It doesn't matter where you were. He's straight there. Yeah. Anyway, he's gone the way of all flesh now. Anyway. So, then fourthly, spiritual discernment of the condition of our congregation. Spiritual discernment of the condition of our congregation. I don't know if you've seen the new little book that they've just done on the Reformed pastor. It's a beautiful little edition. A guy from New Zealand has done it. We're using it with our pastoral team at the moment. It's a devastating book. As you know, the big fat one is a devastating book, but now reduced to its essence, it makes it even harder. And it's like when we gather on a Monday for our meeting, we're going through it, and it's like a knife in the chest, because it's talking about taking heed to ourselves and making sure that we are on track with what it is we are saying to our congregation. And of course, the Word of God first examines us before it examines them. Understanding a congregation is hard as well, isn't it? And the point of Baxter's catechizing, of course, was that he knew his congregation. He knew them in Kidderminster. It was a smaller setup, historically very different from anything that any of us know. But nevertheless, the principle was very, very clear. So he knew those to whom he was speaking. To the extent that we do or we don't, it is a challenge. I don't think I have it with me. I might remember it tomorrow. But I think it's Perkins who has that thing on the seven categories of listeners. Are you familiar with that? The concentric circles of people who are listening to you. There are those who are backslidden. There are those who are backslidden and don't care. Anyway, spiritual awareness of our congregation. Fifthly, and this is all under the primary performance of our pastoral duties. Fifthly, a zeal for the glory of God and compassion for the souls of men. Yeah. You can't fake either one of these. And that's, incidentally, that's one of the benefits of a long haul ministry, that your congregation is able to discount your highs and your lows. It's a long time since you really impressed them. It's a long time since you really, really totally disappointed them. They can say, that was good, that wasn't good, that was a better day, not such a good day. But we're not given points for effectiveness here. We're just trying to be diligent in that regard. And also compassion for people. I mean, I had a minister when I was a boy in Yorkshire who could cry at the drop of a hat. He could, all of a sudden he was crying. But there was no obvious correlation between what he was saying and the fact that he was crying. So, so it kind of didn't work. You know, you know what I mean? It's like, quit doing that. You know, but you know, I found myself just the other day in Luke chapter 2 when I said that Jesus grew up in a kosher home. And then one of my friends who's a Jew, an unbelieving Jew, who's got pancreatic cancer, it just came straight into my mind when I said it. And salvation is first for the Jew. And I was just caught up in the moment of it. It took me by surprise. And that sense of, you know, the awesomeness of what we're actually dealing with. Along with that also, not only a compassion for people, but a sense of divine authority, not an authority that comes with our office, you know, sort of clericalism, but an authority which comes, if you like, by way of unction. I mean, when we view it in terms of position or office, we tempted to say, do you see who I am, or do you know who I am? But when we think about it properly, we say, do you know who he is? And there's too much of the, do you know what I am? And not enough of, do you see who he is? All of that was just under one big heading, and I'm sure you've completely lost the place. It's all under the heading of being set apart to the cause of the gospel and being entrusted with this great privilege. Those things were all subpoints. The second thing, in terms of delight, is what John writes about, seeing our children walking in the truth. The delight, yep.
Can I ask a question real quick that we go back to?
Yeah, definitely. Bail me out, brother.
In our ministry, when we have young men who are sensing that they would want to go into pastoral ministry, how have you seen it effective to kind of counsel, shepherd, mentor them in understanding the call to ministry, the desire, authenticating to the local church, things of that nature? Can you just expand on that just a little bit? You mentioned the call to ministry several times.
Yeah. Well, we for about 15 years now, we've taken in 3 interns a year for that to give them that kind of opportunity. At least a year, either pre-study or post-study or whatever. And they come and they join the team that is already there, some of whom are already ordained, and some are functioning either in youth ministry or whatever else it is, and seeking to discern that themselves. And so what we're doing is we're exposing them to opportunities for ministry, and what we are anticipating is that there will be, where there is a sense of God's call, that there will be a sense of aspiration. There's an increasing desire. I would like to. I want to do that. At the same time, an accompanying sense of diffidence. Who am I that I would ever do that? Where you've got, I want to do that, and I'm really good, and it's good for everybody to find out how good I am. That guy, he's going to sit down at the back of the bus for a while, because that's danger. That's got danger written all over it. Because the fact of the matter is, we live in that tension. All of us live in that tension, don't we? Between what an immense privilege that I get to teach the Bible, and then it's Thursday and it's raining, and you can't understand the text, and you're calling your wife up and you're saying, do you think I could get a job at Walmart or something? I got to get, so she has to coax you back off the wall and keep you going, you know, and stuff. It's in that tension that we live. I mean, look, I'm going to be 70 years old here in a few months. I'm standing in front of you guys. I thought that when you're like 70 years old, you knew everything, that it'd be fine. I'm more fearful now than I was when I preached here when I was an idiot when I was 27 in 1979. I was so stupid then I didn't realize how awesome it was. I'm like, yeah, hey, Grace Church, let's go. Come on. So I look for that in those guys. And some have, one guy went on and did medicine. Other guys have gone on to teach. A number of them have been absorbed into our situation. And so, for example, one of the guys who's in our church plant came as a furry-faced boy from Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids. He came as an intern. He was a good intern. We recognized that. We kept him on. He did this, he did this, he did this. And he's very, very effective in that church plant. The call of God was a growing call within him, and it was... So his subjective sense of aspiration was there, but he's not an arrogant boy. And the objective response of his peers, of the eldership, and ultimately the congregation itself was, we can see this. I mean, there's nothing magical in that. I think that's probably it, isn't it? Yeah. Anything else on that? Well, I just pause. That's fine. Okay. Well, what I was saying was that we see our children walking in the truth. The delight of watching the congregation begin to grasp the storyline of the Bible, that they're not just absorbing things in an atomized fashion, but the pieces are beginning to come together. I mean, just mentioning 1st and 2nd Samuel, it's been one of the most gratifying things to be on a consistent response by people saying, I'm just now figuring out how the whole thing fits together. That Jesus is the prophet, he's the priest, and he's the king. That the promise of 2 Samuel 7, that the searchlight that is roaming around looking for the king is still roaming around. You go into the divided kingdom and they're still looking. There's nobody. And eventually, 400 years of silence and people coming and going. We have seen his star in the east. Where is he that is born the King of the Jews? And suddenly seeing that in relationship to all that precedes that. In the same way, I mean, that's a wonderful thing that they come alive to the truth and the power of the gospel. Also, thirdly, staying long enough to see the little Bo Peep syndrome in operation. What's the little Bo Peep syndrome? Well, it's the people who go out the back door on account of dissatisfaction. They don't like the music. They don't like the youth pastor. They're into parachurch ministry. They think that we ought to be embracing this or we ought to be embracing that. You're too evangelistic. You're not evangelistic enough. You're a Calvinist. You're not a proper Calvinist. You're an Arminian. You don't know this. You don't know that. And all of that stuff, and so on. And off they go. Off they go. And in many cases, they're all back. They don't come back dragging their tails behind them like little Bo Peep, but they come back nevertheless. I mean, even I was talking just now about, masks, no masks, mandates, no mandates, social distance and everything. I had people so annoyed about the fact that we followed the governor's mandate that they went to another church. And they stayed in that church for 12 or 14 months till finally there were no masks anymore because of the governor. Then they all came back. They just come back like, hey, how you doing? And the sort of mature Christian in me wants to say, you don't want to know how I'm doing, because I'd like to give you a doing, quite frankly. But no, I mean, homeschooling. I mean, you go down to R.C. Sproul's thing, homeschool city, you go somewhere else. I said, I don't like this stuff years ago. I don't want this. I can't be, and it's not standing on anybody's toes in particular, but, the people, at the height of it, the people are like, hello, my name's Alistair, and I homeschool my children. It's like, that's the first thing I need to know about you? Do you homeschool your children? That sounds like it's a little over the top. And it was over the top. Yeah, hello, my name is Alistair. I homeschool my children, and I don't let them come to the youth group, because at the youth group, there are non-Christian people that come to the youth group, which of course would be a very unhelpful thing for my children. You remember, Alistair, I homeschooled my children. Hey, you know what? Why don't you take all of them, put them on a bus, and go somewhere where they're going to like that? People are really ticked off. Got on the bus and left. They're all back. One of them's on my pastoral team. That's the benefit of staying here long enough. I don't even remember what they were ticked off about. It's like, oh, you were the homeschool group that went out? Oh, what about the choir? The choir. Do you remember when we sent the choir off for a long vacation? Like forever? Yeah, because we played the Warren Wiersbe card. You know, when the devil fell out of heaven, he landed in the choir. That was on the radio the other day. I had a big long letter from a lady chewing me out because of what I said. And, you know, it's no good when it goes on the radio. But the point was, we had a problem. And it's this problem. That little group, if you notice, if you're not careful with your choir people, whoever they are, incidentally, there's nobody who's the worship leader except Jesus. He is the liturgos. You can call a person the band leader, you can call him the organist, you can call him whatever you want, but you shouldn't call him worship leader, because he doesn't lead the worship. Anyway, so we had to tell the choir, have a vacation. When will we be back? Probably not ever. So that went over real well. But they're all back. They're all back. I told the congregation along the way as well. I said, you know, here's the deal. What happens, I've observed, what happens with guys is the pressure builds, and so the pastor goes. Now, there's reasons why pastors go, and God's providence overrules all that. But I told the congregation, here's the deal. I'm staying. You go. I told them. I said, I'm staying. You go. And a lot of them went. And I'm still here. And many of them have come back. That's one of the delights. You said that's a delight? I thought that was a disaster. No. Fourthly, it allows us to develop leadership skills that take patience and effort. One of the things I realized early on was this: I have to make a decision. Do I want to be liked, or do I want to lead? Do I want to be liked, or do I want to lead? Well, I like to be liked. Of course I do. But I've got to lead. Margaret Thatcher, if you just set out to be liked, you would be prepared to compromise on anything at any time, and you would achieve nothing. Also, when you stay long enough for them to know you. I've alluded to this, but your highs, your lows, your ups, your downs. They've seen you with the birth of your children. They've seen you with the death of your parents. They've seen you with your struggles with your kids. They've seen you dealing with cancer. All of that. They've also determined what your Gary Chapman love language is. What I mean by that is, it's food. It's food. Well, how will I know if the pastor loves me or has stopped loving me? I told him, you'll know when I have stopped going in the kitchen to prepare the food, to provide for you, so that you have a wholesome meal to be able to sustain the journey on which you find yourself. I'm not going to be able to come to all your house. I'm not going to be able to do a lot of those things. So if you want to use that, and people come from other churches, they've come to Parkside, and then they found out that I wasn't going to their home for dinner. So they left the church again. I mean, how can something as small as that be so significant? And yet, it can be. Also, over time, you can earn the right to use the Nehemiah 6:8 response. which I quoted it from the ESV, but in NIV it comes off even better. I mean, this is a classic situation. We should be glad that Nehemiah 6 is in there, because it's always the same, isn't it? So the guy comes and says, "You got a problem, you've got a problem, you've got a problem," and then and Gashmu says it is true. Who in the world's Gashmu? Nobody actually knows. So we just use it. Mr. Reynolds also believes this. Who's Mr. Reynolds? We don't know. Why don't we put it in an open letter? An open letter. Oh, you mean that a lot of people can read? Yeah. And what will it say? It will say something like this. I'm writing this to you today, but I represent a great number of people. A great number of people who are feeling along the very same lines. So, and the text says it. They were just trying to intimidate us. It was a genuine attempt at intimidation. I don't know how to get through pastoral ministry without experiencing that. Now, if you're going to make a run for the border every time you get that, you should keep your passport handy, because you'll be on the go. And I'm not talking about being recalcitrant. I'm not talking about being bolshy. I'm not talking about being rude. But the Nehemiah 6:8 response needs to be in the arsenal of the average pastor. It goes like this. So, Mrs. So-and-so writes to me, I know that you're trying to do this because of that, because of the next thing. And it's all bogus. We're not talking about morality or anything here. We're talking about opinion and everything else. Dear Anne, Nehemiah 6:8, your pastor and friend, Alistair. She goes to Nehemiah 6:8. She doesn't know what it is. She looks it up. It says, nothing like what you say is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. That's it. Now, how many times have I used Nehemiah 6:8 in 38 years? Maybe 3. You know, you go to people's houses and they have dogs that jump up. The blooming thing jumps up. Why does it jump up? Because you never taught it not to jump up. Because you never took a Wall Street Journal, whacked it on the nose. Because you're a dog lover. Oh, the poor dog. Oh, jump. So everybody comes to the house who's got to deal with this. Whoa, goodness gracious, what is this? Right? Because you wouldn't take the newspaper and bring the dog into subjugation. If you don't do that with those people, they'll be jumping up on everybody all the time. Your young pastors, your elders, and everybody else. And they've got to know you love them. Anne and I are still friends. We didn't lose friendship over this. But I wasn't going to take her on at her level. No, and I got to write back. Paragraph 1, bogus. Paragraph 2, you got a point, but no good. No. Just Nehemiah 6:8. Have a great afternoon. Yeah. Go. No, this is great. And people are thrilled with it.
How do we know when to take that response and when not to? How much time do we need to have under us?
Well, here, listen, brother, I'll tell you. Again, when I was younger, so much younger than today, you know, when I came to this place in Cleveland, I mean, I wasn't using Nehemiah 8 because I hadn't found it, but I realized early on that I was going to have to, and again, I don't say it to my credit, and if it comes across that way, it shouldn't. But looking back on it, if I had come on a round trip ticket, I wouldn't have lasted 3 years in that church. I wouldn't have lasted 3 years in church. The guy who was responsible for me coming, you know, the search guy, he left within 3 months of me showing up. A guy that they had called to be the pastor when I declined their invitation, on his first Sunday, he wasn't there. He left before he even preached his first sermon. And he said to whoever he was talking to that the place was a rat's nest. And it was full of, 12 men went to spy on Canaan kind of stuff. And he wasn't Joshua or Caleb, clearly. Anyway, it's a long story. But the fact is, I inherited whatever that thing was. And there was a lot of stuff. And so the congregation tolerated me, and I tolerated them. And even trivial things, like when we got picked up from the airport, we're not recording all that stuff, or maybe we are. No.
Only video.
We got picked up from the airport, and the guy who's the chairman of the deacons, he's driving me to a house where we're going to stay with my kids. The youngest is 10 months, and the oldest is 4. And we're driving in the car, and he says, and I got you a car. Now, I've flown from Scotland to Boston to Cleveland. My 4-year-old has never had access to Diet Coke in such volume in the entire first 4 years of his life. And as we're now, put your tray tables in the upright and locked position, we're in that mode now. And he goes, Dad, and he's wearing khaki pants, and he offloads the 3 liters of Diet Coke. And as the plane is descending, I'm saying to Sue, these people there better be nobody here to welcome us, because this is embarrassing stuff. So I walk off the plane with my son. He's like this. And sure enough, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If I could have turned around, gone right down the thing, no, that's okay, thank you. So I go right back in the thing. Anyway, so the guy says, I got you a car. I don't want a car. What do you mean you got me a car? So you say, well, you're weird. I admit that. But the fact of this matter is, he got me a car. That's controlling me. What if I don't want a car? What if I want a horse? Anyway, he thought he was doing a good thing. So he drops us off at this place, and he tells me the car is in the garage. In the morning, incidentally, it was hotter than the devil on the 3rd of August. We're on the 3rd floor of somebody's house. There's no air conditioning up there. We're all lying stark naked. We've never been this hot in our entire life. The youngest is 10 months. It's going well. Let's just put it that way. I go down the stairs in the morning, I go out, and I go in, I open this garage. There's this, what to me at that point, you got to understand, I'm coming from VW Polo land, all right, and there's a Chevrolet Caprice, okay, that's got a bench seat on it where you could sleep with your wife for a year, and on the front, and it is emerald green. Now you got to understand that if you're a Protestant from Glasgow, you are a Rangers supporter. Rangers is blue. The Catholics are green. You do not have anything green if you're a bona fide Protestant. So I get in the thing, and I'm sitting in the car, and I said, if any of my friends could see me in this thing, they'd think that I was pretending to be Rex Humbard or some other crazy thing. And then I just cried. I just said, oh, man. Then I said, okay, get a hold of yourself. So I go back in. I get on the phone to the chairman guy. Hello? Yeah. Hey, good morning. You make it through the night? Oh, yeah. Hey, just one thing. That car, I don't want it. There's just deathly silence. Like, pardon? Yeah, I can't drive that car. Why not? Well, there's a number of reasons. You won't understand them all. But I can't have it. He said, well, what do you want me to do? I says, I don't know. Whoever brought it here, have him come back and take it away. He took it away. Gone. That sent a little message here. Not necessarily a good one, but a message. Within 24 hours, hello, my name is Penelope so-and-so, and I'm your real estate agent. I said, excuse me? I don't have a real estate agent. She said, no, that's what I'm telling you. I said, excuse me, that's not what you're telling me. I don't want you to be my real estate agent. I don't know who you are. This is a member of the church, one part of the leadership team. So I had to knock that one on the head. And it just went from there. And I had to, well, here's the best of them. Now you got deacons and you got elders. The deacons and the elders get together for a monthly meeting where they're all doing their thing. I'm in the thing, it's meeting in someone's house. So the people are doing their stuff. Guy says, one of the elders says to the person, the deacons, said, did that check for 25,000 get put in the such and such account? Response, no, it didn't. We decided not to do that. We did X. Guy goes, okay. I go, excuse me, what do you mean okay? So it's like electricity going around the room. I said, guys, do you understand what deacons do? Do you understand what elders do? They didn't. They hadn't a clue. I said, look, the deacons, it's a distinction of function. It's not a distinction of value. The deacons exist as the servant arm of the directives of the elders who are responsible for the fiduciary responsibilities of the church as well as the spiritual well-being. So if the elders say that 25 grand is supposed to go somewhere, it's supposed to go where it goes. Well, it was like electricity in the room, but I'd done it already. Next meeting, we're meeting in the building, and it's just our elders meeting. Guy says, first matter on the agenda, we had a letter from the chairman of the deacons. He says, they have resigned en masse. Okay? He says, what do you think we should do with this? I said, accept it immediately. I said, it's the best thing that could ever have happened. It's absolutely fantastic. And so that's exactly what happened. And again, I was so stupid that it never occurred to me to be anything other than I was. But I was 31. And so, but let me give you the flip side of it as well, because I can hear myself speaking, and I don't even like myself as I'm describing this. Fast forward a little bit, we're in an elders meeting. In the elders meeting, I noticed over a period of time that one of the elders changed his views from one meeting to the next. And it was happening on this particular night. And I suddenly realized it. And I said, hey, this is right in the meeting. I said, you know what? Why don't you send your wife to these meetings? Because it's patently obvious to me that when you go home and you discuss this, she actually has a view on it, which becomes your view, which is now represented in this meeting. And that's no good. That's no good. Well, electricity around the room. People are like, well, let's see what else we can. So the next morning, there was a guy who was one of the elders. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, a Texan, and called Bill. And he called me on the phone. He says, hey, Alistair, yeah, Bill, what you said last night might have been true, but it wasn't the right time. It wasn't in the right way. You harmed the guy. You harmed yourself. You harmed the meeting. I said, okay. So here's the deal. Get on the phone to that guy and apologize to him. And call me back when you've done it. So I put the phone down. Now I got a crisis on my own hands, right? So I go back to function or unction. Hey, do you know who I am? I'm the pastor of this church. I'm not here on a fool's errand. All that stuff going through your mind. But right in your core, you got to phone that guy. And of course, that's exactly what I did. And in the mercy and providence of God, over time again, the guys who are in leadership with me they love me, they appreciate me, but there's appreciation, but there's no adulation. So you want appreciation, but you don't want adulation. You get adulation, Ravi had adulation. James MacDonald, adulation. You don't want adulation. And so, when do you do that? When you have to. And it seems to me, looking back on it, that if I hadn't been stupid enough to do those things, in simple things like that in the early days, I would not have marked out my territory. I'm not really into dogs, but I mean, you got to mark your space. Don't go peeing on my tree. That kind of thing. You got to do that. And when I went home, I stayed for 3 years before I went home. And when I got home, I said to myself, I don't know why this is so hard. I'm pulling on the rope and the bell isn't ringing. And it just became obvious to me. He said, that is because, Alistair, that the bell isn't attached to the rope. Now you need to go back and you got to attach that bell to the rope, whatever's involved in that. So in other words, I think we all go into situations with certain assumptions. And so I had assumptions about the nature of the church, and assumptions about the nature of Sunday evening service. I mean, I had the Sunday evening service before I got there. There was it could be held in the pastor's study, and it never once occurred to me. I said, "Well, I'll see you all tonight." And the people came back for the first time, and then I started doing stuff for children. And so all the young couples were there because we were doing Pilgrim's Progress, and they were learning stuff that they didn't even know. And then we did a series on what the Lord Jesus means to me through the alphabet. He's my advocate. He's the bread of life. He's the captain of my salvation. This is all quotes teaching the children, but actually it was laying a foundation for the thing. But I had leadership people leave the church because he said I was a legalist. You're a legalist. You tell people the evening service. Why do you do that? I don't like the evening service. So, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. It's my new catchphrase. When was the last break? Staying long enough to marry the children of those you married at the beginning. The guy that I mentioned, the homeschooler guy, I did his baby dedication. He's married with 3 children. He's a member of the pastoral team. God restores the years the locusts eaten. Because he knows our hearts, right? And he compensates for us. And also staying long enough to be prepared to admit your faults and your failings. To let the people know. And I'm not talking about naked preaching. I can't stand that stuff. Well, I'm a dreadful wretch, and I think it's good for you to know. We know you're a dreadful wretch. You don't have to stand there and say that. No. But, for example, being prepared to, I'll give you a case in point. I'm preaching through Colossians on marriage and about the nature of preferring one another in love with our wives and so on. And so you're going to love your wife the way Christ loved the church. And so you're doing all the usual stuff. But as I'm speaking, it's like in the back of my head, the voice says, you should be honest enough. This is while I'm speaking. You should be honest enough to tell them the Norman story. Tell them the Norman story. It's like in my mind. How when you're preaching, you're working on multiple levels, right? So you're thinking like, why is that guy looking at me like that while you're saying something else? And like, why doesn't that person take that child to the nursery? They're driving me nuts, and all of that's going on. So what's the Norman story? Well, then I did tell him the Norman story. Because I was playing golf with this guy. And he said to me, can I say something to you? I said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you what it is. He said, you're you're awful sore on your wife. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when we have Sue on her own, she is bright, she's engaged, she contributes, and so on. But when you're in the room, you suck all the air out of her balloon because you are front and center all the time. And I'm just going to say that to you. And the best thing that I could have done in that thing was tell them that Norman story, because they suddenly realized, okay, so the pastor's been married for 46 years and he still recognizes that too. So that not for no other reason than the sense of authentication in what's going on. I mean, some of the preaching is so that people could be forgiven for thinking that we're actually living at a different level entirely, when we're not living at a different level. We're living confronted by a calling, but we're dealing with the same stuff. Well, I can keep going, but I mean, these are just, do you want a few dangers? Okay. All right, the other thing about staying long enough is that you don't even need to, you don't need to be unduly disturbed by the latest circus, right? You know, I mean, I've been there for the Toronto Blessing, which is just across the lake. Nobody had heard of it. People were coming from Australia for the Toronto Blessing in via Cleveland. They're like, we're looking for the Toronto Blessing. Said, no, we never heard of it. He said, well, you laugh, you bark like a dog and everything. I said, really? Wow, we got to go check that out. People over here in California, they were flying in to stay in the hotel, the Toronto Blessing. The Experiencing God book, right? Experiencing God. Do you read your Bible or do you experience God? Whatever it is, they've all come and gone. It's like the circus comes through town, elephants crap on the ground. Eventually, they shovel it up, put it on the roses, and it goes on from there. But as long as you can just let it come through, it'll be through. It's gone. It's gone. What are we on to now? We're on got another one now. There'll be another one. You stay long enough, you can relax. But if you're going to get set aside by it, you'll go crazy. Yeah, the seeker-sensitive movement, the emergent church. The who's doing what church, the thing church, yeah. Relax. 2 Timothy 4:5. Keep your head, endure hardship, do the work of an evangelist, and discharge all the duties of your ministry. And you know what to do tomorrow? The exact same. And just keep doing it. 2 Timothy 4:5. Dangers, telling lies while telling the truth. Telling lies while telling the truth. You know, in the Four Loves, C.S. Lewis's Four Loves, he's got that great thing about those like myself are in danger of something, because when we describe an experience that we ourselves have never actually had, we deceive ourselves and we deceive our hearers. And so I'm not talking plagiarism here. I'm just talking about being honest about realms of spiritual geography. So the danger of telling lies while telling the truth. Secondly, the dangers of excessive popularity. It's unusual, but cherishing exaggerated ideas of ourselves. The danger, the flip side of that, the danger of crippling despondency. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody's ever experienced this, so on. Again, you remember Luther, he comes down for breakfast and she's all dressed in black, his wife. He says, my dear, what has happened? Has somebody died that I didn't know? Yes, says Mrs. Luther, God has died. Come now, said Luther, that is a dreadful thing to say. Then she said, well, why, my dear Martin, do you live as you live if God is still alive? He needed a taste of his own medicine. And yeah, I was just trying to decipher my own scribbles there. But somebody goes to Martin Luther for counseling with some deep problem, and he says to him, harness the horses and spread manure on the fields, which is pretty good. Somebody comes to talk to you about their marriage, you tell them, harness the horses and spread manure on the fields. That'll get it for you. I'll clear your sinuses out. The danger of laziness, intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual laziness. The danger of misplaced affection. Love in ministry more than I love Jesus. Getting fascinated by the smell of somebody else's perfume. I tell my guys, if you're looking forward to a lady in the church that's coming to see you, and you're looking forward to it, and it's not your wife or your sister, then don't see her. Because I don't know why you're looking forward to it. I said, well, I think you're a bit of a whatever. Yeah, I am, but I'm just telling you. Danger, prayerlessness. Danger, widening gap between my life and my doctrine, 1 Timothy 4:16. Danger, prayerlessness. Danger, becoming jaded, cynical. The danger of spiritual arterial sclerosis, a hardening of the spiritual arteries. A man may preach every day in the week and not have his heart engaged with it once. The danger of tradition. How quickly it can set in, how blind we can be to it. Loss of focus. Danger of theological contamination. Capitulation. Constipation. Danger of becoming Statler and Waldorf. The older you get, you listen to it. Suddenly you sound like your grandfather. How can I sound like my grandfather? Well, you're as old as your grandfather was. The two old guys in the Muppets, right? They just sit up there on the balcony. Nobody knows what they're saying, but they're ticked off about everything. And two disagreeable old men. Wouldn't it be terrible to end as a disagreeable old man? Or worse still, as a disagreeable, dirty old man? Well, that's pride. Got nothing here. It's nothing worthwhile. I think the one thing I would say, though, maybe just in conclusion, is, well, I'd quote George Burns. Remember old George Burns? He's buried in, lay me down in Forest Home. He's buried in Forest Home, buried beside his wife, big long cigar. And he did that. He did the kind of talking thing to the music at a bar down in Dallas. An old guy chimed in, and I thought he was out of his head. Because being a young guy, I just laughed it off when I heard what the old geezer said. He said, never again will I chase young ladies something or run and chase after the wind. Never again will I turn young ladies' heads or run and chase after the wind. Because I'm 3/4 done from the start to the end. And I wish I was 18 again. Yeah, I wish I was 18 again. To go where I've never been. Because I'm 3/4 done from the start to the end. And I wish I was 18 again. Now, in Burns' case, that's sentimentalism. In my case, what I'm saying is this. Knowing all that I know, knowing all of the peculiar challenges that everybody's on about now, about this, the church, and look at the state, and the thing, and the so on and so forth. If you could get a chance, if you could get a redo, if you could go back again, I'd take it in a minute. I'd take it in a minute. And that's how I want to finish. I want to finish with that mentality. I don't want to finish some guy complaining about everything. It used to be, and it used to be. No. If we could start again, and that's why I love the young guys on my team. The young guy told me, do 1 Samuel. Why am I listening to this guy? Because I love him. Because he's right. Because he's good. He's really good. I love the fact that 4 of those guys are preaching over the next 13 weeks, because unbeknown to you, I just started my sabbatical. How's it going? And and I love the fact that they're there to do that. I actually, in a strange way, I feel ambivalent about it, but I love the fact that they can hit the ball further than me. Mind you, most people can, even Lawson can. But we've got it. That's part of the game, isn't it? Our kids have got to be able to run faster than us. They've got to be hit the ball longer than us. They've got to do that, and our spiritual children as well. And then we can relax. J.C. Ryle, Volume 7, page 269, quote, "Fear not for the church of Christ when ministers die and saints are taken away. Christ can ever maintain his own cause. He will raise up better servants and brighter stars. The stars are all in his right hand. Leave off all anxious thought about the future. Cease to be cast down by the measures of statesmen or the plots of wolves in sheep's clothing. Christ will ever provide for his own church. Christ will take care that the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. All is going on well, though our eyes may not see it. The kingdoms of this world shall yet become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ." It's pretty good, isn't it? Leave off all anxious thoughts about the future. He will raise up better servants and brighter stars. Think how dark England was. The lady had a baby. He says, I call him John. John what? John Wesley. Lady had a baby. What are you going to call him? I'll call him Charles. I had a baby, a boy, George. You mean Whitfield? Yeah.
This message was brought to you from Truth for Life, where the learning is for living. To learn more about Truth for Life with Alistair Begg, visit us online at truthforlife.org.